Hi, everyone. Clearly, I'm in a different location than usual. By the way, hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time. But yeah, I did a community post on my channel a few days ago, so you guys most likely know what's going on, but for those of you that don't, long story very, very short. We went through Hurricane Ida here in Southeast Louisiana. We are not doing well, especially the area where our house is. And so, yeah, a tree fell through like the back part of our house during the storm. And so it is not livable. And it probably will not be livable for months to come. So just a few days ago, my mom, my dog, and I drove from our house about an hour away to where my sister lives, which is where I am right now and where I'm filming. Luckily she has a ring light because she also had a YouTube channel at one point, although I think she still posts on it. So yeah, she was nice enough to let me film in her office, and so I have this fun little curtain to film in front of, and I've been missing Booktube. Booktube is a source of happiness and escapism for me, and so I've just been really missing it, and so I really wanted to film something for you guys. So today I decided to film my end of August reading wrap up. I have 19 books to talk about in today's video. As usual, if you want to see my mid-month wrap up, I'm gonna have that linked up in the cards above. So let's just go ahead and kind of jump in. I'll just put pictures of all the books over here because obviously I do not have my books with me. First things first, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I reread this for the first time, and I'm not going to talk about the plot or anything because I feel like this book is so popular at this point that if you don't know what it's about, I would just point you to Goodreads. But yeah, this was my first time rereading it, and what I realized this second time around is that the romance between Evelyn and Celia just hit different this time. I feel like I was just so much more invested in their romance than I was the first time. I feel like the first time I was more just like mesmerized by Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing and just all of the characters as a whole and just Evelyn herself. So I wasn't really focusing on the romance, but this time around, I don't know, I just got really invested and I teared up quite a few times. So yeah, I wholeheartedly recommend rereading this if you're someone like me who hasn't read it in a few years. I think the first time I read it was back in 2018, so it was definitely time for a reread. Next, I read The Monsters of Verity Duet by Victoria Schwab. So the first book in this is This Savage Song, and this is a very interesting series, very interesting world. This series is a few years old at this point, so I feel like I'm probably one of the last people on Booktube to actually read it, but this was on my list of 21 books I want to read in 2021, which is a video I will link up in the cards above as well. But this takes place in a paranormal kind of world, but it sounds like it takes place in a place that used to be the United States of America and is now known as something else. And basically any terrible act that is committed by humans, that energy creates a monster. And so we are centering around two main characters. I cannot remember the girl's name. Was her name Kate? I don't know, but August was the male main character and he's actually a monster. And then Kate, or whatever her name is, she's a human. What I will say about this is that I expected this to be more of a romance than it actually is. I feel like we get an inkling of one in the second book, but it's really, really not about a romance at all. It's about everything else going on in this world. Yeah, I feel like I don't have too much to say about this first book, except that I put in my Goodreads review that had I read this like 3 or so years ago when I was like really, really, really into YA fantasy and paranormal, I probably would have been obsessed with this book and I probably would have given it 5 stars. But reading it today when I'm much more into like adult romance and things like that, I feel like that might be why I didn't love this as much as I thought I was going to. And then the second book, our Dark Duet, I really enjoyed as well. The first book I gave 4 stars. Yeah, this one I gave 3.5 stars. I think that's mainly because some of the most interesting characters were killed off in the first book. And the direction the plot went in this one wasn't as interesting to me. Yeah, I would recommend this duology for sure. The world, like I said, is very interesting, very unique. And yeah, I had a good time with it overall. Oh Lord. Next we have Coach My Stalker by Jessa Cain, who is one of my all-time favorite romance novella authors. And I did not finish this. I am going to direct you to my Goodreads review. I always have my Goodreads linked down in the description below in my link tree if you guys are interested in becoming friends with me or following me on there. I have a very lengthy rant review about this novella on my Goodreads, so definitely check that out if you are interested. But I'm just gonna say here, so I DNF'd it at about 55%, and I said it started off kind of hot because I love me a good stalker slash obsessed hero. Like, I love Jessa Cain's stalker romances. The others that I've read by her, I've at least given like 4 or 5 stars. I think she is amazing at writing those kind of romances. But this one quickly turned very creepy and predatory. Yeah, like it's just, oh man, the whole plot of this is problematic because it's about Everett, who is Margot's diving coach. He became her coach when she was 16 and very quickly became absolutely obsessed with her in a creepy way, in a sexual way. And so now she's 18 at the start of the novella. Things start happening between them. But there's a kink in here that I think is known as age play, and basically Margot, the heroine, started acting very childlike when they were getting ready to have sex, and it really freaked me out, creeped me out, and I just immediately had to DNF it. It was just, oh man. But the next book I have to talk about is a book that I actually really loved, and that is The Initiation, which is book 1 in the Filthy Rich American series by Nikki Sloan. So I read the entire like first trilogy of this series because Nikki Sloan is still writing books of this series, but it's kind of broken up in like this first trilogy is about Marist and Royce, and then the 4th book and the 5th book are about different characters. So I was really excited going to this book. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. I kind of didn't. I just knew that the initiation itself was going to be absolutely insane. I'm not going to go too much into the plot of this, but it is about Marist, our main character. She ends up getting married to this guy, Royce, basically because her family is in a really bad financial situation. And so Royce and Royce's father, McAllister, are going to get Marist's family out of that situation if she marries Royce. And so McAllister and Royce are on the board. Well, McAllister is on the board and Royce is trying to get on the board of this really huge bank. But in order for Royce to get on the board, he has to be married and he has to go through this initiation. And as I was reading the book, I kind of had an idea of what I thought the initiation might be, and I was like half right, I would say. It was just a little bit more bonkers than I thought it was going to be, but I was on the right track for sure. Is something else. I've never read a book or a series quite like this before. I actually had to give this 5 stars. I think at the end of the day, this book was just so addictive, and Nikki Sloan really made this crazy ass situation work. And by the end, I actually really liked Marist and Royce together. I wasn't a fan of them like towards the beginning and middle of the book, but definitely by the end, I was rooting for them. And this book ends on a cliffhanger, so I almost immediately jumped into the second book, which is The Obsession. I might have loved this book even more than the first book, which is really saying something, so I definitely gave it 5 stars. What I loved about this book is that we explore McAllister's character a lot more, and I just find his character to be so fascinating. He's definitely an antagonist to Marist and Royce, and he's Royce's father. Like, there's just so many interesting dynamics going on. Something else that I just adore about this series is the way that Greek mythology is incorporated into it, and kind of comparisons that are made between characters and Greek gods and goddesses. I think that that was just so well done and really cool. And then the third book, The Deception, I gave this one 4 stars. I did enjoy it. Didn't think it was as captivating or entertaining as the first two books, but I still recommend it. I'm really looking forward to the Redemption book 4 because that is going to be McAllister's story. I'm really excited for that. Yeah, just know that this is, I would say, a dark romance series. Things get really crazy. There's weird cheating involved. I don't know. There's just a lot of weird things happening. You know, there's definitely some like secret society vibes going on. This also gave me like an adult Gossip Girl type vibe because it definitely reads as like a soap opera in book form. Yeah, I thought this was absolutely fantastic. So next up, because I was like traumatized by my last Jessica Kane novella that I read, I really wanted to read something else by her to just remind myself of how much I love her and why I love her usually. So I went into Queensized, which is one of her very few novellas that features a plus-sized heroine. And this one is like a fantasy slash historical romance that takes place in a fictional kingdom. Kind of feels like in the medieval era. And we have our two main characters, Gwen and Corbett. Corbett is a king and Gwen is just a commoner. And yeah, Corbett kind of immediately falls in love with her, and for most of the novella only wants her as his mistress, and she's like, no, I need a husband so that I can support my sisters and respect myself. Like, you know, being a mistress just doesn't work for her. That is not the life that she wants. I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I expect more from Jessica Kane at this point, so this one was just kind of like middle of the road for me. It wasn't bad, it wasn't amazing, but I would recommend it if you're looking to like dive into some kind of different romances from her, because obviously like most of what she writes is contemporary, whereas this is more like a fantasy historical. Next up, I read Rush, which is the first book in the Palm South University series. I did give this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed this, but I didn't love it. It is told in the format of a TV show. Think shows like Greek, 90210, Gossip Girl, things like that. We're centering around quite a few main characters, I would say, at least 4 or 5 POVs in this book, but nothing gets confusing at all. And I really liked how it was written, in that it's broken up by episodes. Like, there are chapters within the episodes, but I liked that if you wanted, you could just like read an episode at a time or something like that. But I did read this in the span of one day. The reason why I didn't love this is because this centers so much on Greek life at this Palm South University, and fraternities and sororities, that is something that has never and will never appeal to me. So I just didn't really care all that much when they would go into like how Rush works and just how being in one of these organizations works and things like that. Like, I just didn't really care. But I liked a lot of the characters. I will say, especially like a lot of the female characters read very similarly. Like, to me, they all had very similar personalities. So that was also like not the most interesting to read about. So I probably won't continue with this series, but I would recommend trying it out for yourself. So yeah, this is a kinky paranormal romance novella series, and this one is about a succubus and a genderqueer death's head hawk moth fairy. So I thought that that was really cool that one of the main characters identifies basically as like non-binary or genderqueer. And what was also interesting is that sometimes the narrator of the story was the heroine, the succubus. And so sometimes she would refer to Pi, I think that was his name. I think it was spelled like P-Y-E. Sometimes she would refer to Pi as he, and sometimes she would refer to Pi as they. And I thought that was really interesting because I've never read a book with a character that went by multiple pronouns. Usually, any like non-binary characters that I followed in books, they usually only go by they, them. So I thought that that was really cool. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It's really short, sexy, to the point, and it sounds like there's going to be like full-length novels about these characters that are featured in these novellas. So yeah, the second novella was Skin. This one was between a gargoyle and a banshee, which is really interesting because those are paranormal creatures that I've never read about in any kind of paranormal romance. Unfortunately, I gave this one 2 stars. I don't know, man. In this one, I feel like Aveda Weiss just didn't do a good job of establishing the relationship between these 2 characters. So I just didn't care about them, and I was just reading it because it was so short. Like, I feel like I felt like I couldn't DNF it because it was only like 40 to 50 pages. So I did finish it, but I was bored. So I gave it 2 stars, unfortunately. Next book I want to talk about was a very pleasant surprise for me, and this is If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wiverly and Austin Sigmund Broca. So I read their debut novel, which I can't even remember the title of, but what's really cool about their novels is that they are based off of works by Shakespeare. So that first novel of theirs that I read, I think, was based off of Romeo and Juliet, and this one is based off of The Taming of the Shrew. And so we have our main character Cameron. This is YA, so they're in high school. She has a crush on this guy Andrew, but he sees that she's not a very nice person. She can be pretty mean to people at times, and so he's not really attracted to her anymore. And so she decides to tame herself, very much like the character of Catherine in The Taming of the Shrew. And she starts by apologizing to people that she's wronged. And so that kind of starts with this guy, Brendan, who was a guy that she like single-handedly destroyed his reputation some years before by giving him like a really terrible nickname. As you can probably tell, she starts falling for Brendan, who is just the sweetest cinnamon roll guy, and he's really into like computers and making video games. And so she starts falling for him instead of Andrew, who was the guy she was initially crushing on. And I loved this so freaking much. I think mainly because of Cameron's character. I think she goes through a lot of character development, and this was just such a fun book to read as well. I had no problem reading this in just a few hours. Like, I was just flying through it. I thought it was paced beautifully. I loved this so much, and it makes me really excited to jump into some of their other books, because I think they have like 2 other books out at the moment, and I think these authors are married to each other, if I'm not mistaken, which is so fun. Next book I want to discuss is A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Barnard. So this past month I kind of got more back into like YA contemporary novels, and I definitely want to read more and more of them. That was something that I was really into in like 2018, 2019. We are centering around 2 disabled characters. So we have Steffi, our main character. She used to have selective mutism. It sounds like in the present day she doesn't anymore, although she definitely still deals with a lot of anxiety surrounding that selective mutism and things like that. And then we have this guy Reese, who is the new boy at her high school. He is actually deaf. And so when Steffi was really going through her selective mutism, she decided to learn BSL, which is British Sign Language, because this novel, and I believe this author, is also British, and so it takes place in England. And so because she knows a good bit of BSL, the school kind of assigns her to Reese as someone that he can communicate with. And so we very quickly see that this is going to be a romance between the 2 of them. And I think I ended up giving this like 4, maybe 4.5 stars. Like, it was pretty close to a 5-star, but there were a couple of things that kind of stopped me from giving it a full 5-star rating. I do want to point out, you know, obviously I can't speak to the deaf or selective mutism representation in this. And from what I understand, because I've read a couple of Goodreads reviews from Own Voices readers and reviewers, and in Sarah's author's note, she confesses that her knowledge of things like BSL is limited. You know, I don't know if she did this or not, but to me it sounds like she should have gotten people in the deaf and selective mutism community to beta read this book. But I still enjoyed this book a lot. I really liked the writing. I loved the romance between Steffi and Reese. Like, Reese is just the sweetest boy ever. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out for yourself. Just know that it's not a perfect book. I mean, no book is perfect, but just know that there's most likely issues with the deaf representation in particular. Okay, so next up I read another YA contemporary. This was Wild Blue Wonder by Carly Sarosiak. Our main character Quinn and her family live on the property of this summer camp that her family runs during the summers. And so we find out that her best friend Dylan passed away during like this past summer. So it time jumps between like then, like June, July, like during the summer, and now like November, December. So just a few months later. And so Quinn is obviously not in a good place. She's very much reeling from this loss. She blames herself for Dylan's death. And we see that her relationships with her siblings have deteriorated quite a bit, to the point where they can't even have civil conversations anymore. And so seeing that mystery slowly revealed of what actually happened between her and Dylan and Quinn's siblings, like I thought that was really interesting to read about. I loved the writing in general, and man, this book really just came and smacked me in the face. Like towards the end, the scene in particular where we see what actually happened to Dylan, I did not expect to get as emotionally invested as I did. Like I was bawling crying. I did not expect to get that invested in this book at all, because most of the rest of the book was just like very good, like a solid 4-star read for me. I really liked the characters, really liked where the story was going, but I just didn't expect the book to affect me as much as it did. And so just no content warning for drowning and for loss of a best friend and guilt. I highly recommend it if you are looking for an emotional YA contemporary. I think that you would enjoy this. Next up, we have Mountain Captive by Cassie Mint. You guys may know that I've been really getting into this author for sure, because she writes a ton of novellas. A lot of her novellas actually remind me of Jessica Cain's. Like there's just similar types of characters and tropes that this author uses that reminds me of Jessica Cain. And this is actually the first novella of Cassie Mintz that I've given 5 stars. All the other ones that I've read I've given 4 stars. I really enjoyed, but this one to me was just on another level. So this is kind of book 1 in a novella series. I think it's called like the Wild Obsession series, if I'm not mistaken, and it's just like a group of 4 novellas that take place in different kinds of wilderness environments. So this one takes place in the woods. We are centering around our main characters, Natalia and Carver, I think was his name. And so yeah, Carver is basically stalking Natalia while she's hiking through the woods, and he kidnaps her to get back at her father, and things go on from there. I thought this was a fantastic chef's kiss, amazing stalker slash kidnapping romance. If you are in the mood for a darker romance novella, like I think you'd have a fun time with this one. Next up is a thriller. I have not read a thriller in quite a while actually, so I like need to get back on that because I really love the thriller genre. I just haven't read many of them lately. So this is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I was turned on to this book from Riley Marie here on Booktube because she compared this to the film Promising Young Woman, which is a film that I have not watched yet, but I have been meaning to because the plot just sounds so good. So in this book, we are centering around 2 main characters. We have Scarlett, who is a literature professor at this university. We see that she is a serial killer. She has been killing and torturing men that do terrible things, and she's basically doing this because of something that happened to her in her past. And so in present day, when this novel is taking place, we're seeing that her next target is actually her co-worker, and then we are also following the POV of Carly, who is a freshman at the same university. And so it's very interesting to see like what kind of connection there's going to be between these 2 main characters. And yeah, I gave this 4 stars. It gave me exactly what I wanted from it. Just a really great revenge serial killer thriller. Like, I don't know, it was just a good time. I would recommend it for sure. I've heard people say that this gave them what Promising Young Woman didn't, like maybe a better ending or something like that. I don't really know because like I said, I haven't seen that film yet, but I would recommend it. Next up, we have the Coppersmith Farmhouse. This is book 1 of the Jameson Valley series by Devney Perry. This is a book in a series that was not on my radar at all, but Hoopla has this program called, like, I want to say instant borrows or bonus borrows, where every month they have like a curated list of audiobooks, ebooks, movies, TV shows, things like that, where if you borrow them, they don't count towards your monthly limit. So this was one of the books that was on there, and so I borrowed the audiobook, and I really enjoyed this. I really didn't know what to expect going into it. I don't know, based on the cover, I thought it was going to be more like women's fiction, but it is definitely a romance novel about a hot, grumpy sheriff and a single mother, and there are suspense elements thrown in. I do enjoy romantic suspense, but I don't know, for some reason I feel like it's hard to find good, like really good romantic suspense novels. So if you have recommendations, please leave them in the comments below, because I do enjoy that genre for sure. And then I was actually surprised because there's a decent amount of steam in this. I really loved the hero because he's very demanding and possessive. Like literally they go on one date, him and the heroine, and he's like, so we're dating exclusively now, like you're mine, okay, thanks, bye. And she's just like, excuse me. So I don't know, I really loved that. But yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it. I think I might continue on in this series. Next up we have Getting Schooled. This is book 1 in the Wright Brothers series by Christina C. Jones. This one is more of a novella, I would say. And this one I was attracted to because it has good disability representation. The hero is an amputee, and he has a prosthetic leg. The premise of this one, it's about Jason and Reese. Reese is a graduate teaching assistant for her mother, who is teaching a class that Jason is in. But Jason and Reese are just about the same age. Like there's nothing really like weird about their situation at all. And yeah, this kind of starts out as like enemies to friends to lovers. Yeah, I really enjoyed the slightly antagonistic banter between Jason and Reese. Like that was just really fun to read about. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this one. I really enjoyed the disability representation as well as the anxiety representation, because Reese, our heroine, has pretty severe anxiety, and I thought that that was really well done. So the last novel I have to talk about, and certainly not least, is The Lineup by Megan Quinn. This was my very first Megan Quinn novel. This is book 3 in her Brentwood Boys series, which, just like most romance series, you don't have to read them in order at all, but the plot of this one appealed to me the most, so that's why I started with this one. And this one is about Jason. So he is a pretty famous baseball player at this point, and then Dottie, our heroine, who when they were in college, she had a huge crush on him but like never talked to him. And so now we're in present day, and there's like this charity auction going on where like the more you donate, the bigger your chance of winning a date with Jason. And so basically her assistant mistakenly donates money for this charity auction thing, and so she ends up getting the date with Jason, and things go on from there. This is definitely a Grump Sunshine trope where the heroine is the grump. She's definitely more guarded, and Jason, our hero, is very sunshiny. Really funny. He's really goofy. Something I loved about this book is Megan Quinn's sense of humor. It's definitely wacky and quirky, kind of out there. Like, I don't know, some of the things that her characters would say in this book, I was like, well, okay, we're going there now, all right. Like, you know, it just took a little bit getting used to her writing style and her sense of humor. But yeah, it was just like very unique and fun to read about. So yeah, I would wholeheartedly recommend this. I gave this 4 stars. I'm really looking forward to reading more books in this series. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this very long end of August wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would tell me about some of the books that you read in August, and I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!